This is sort of a mini series I'm doing alongside my documenting the building of my loft layout, where I'm going to be scratch building a large underground station hub for my underground rolling stock. So what I'm going to do in this episode is introduce you to the thoughts and ideas I had for building my new Uxbridge station, basically, which is going to be my central hub, and how I went about putting together the initial design idea to end up with the sort of prototype you can see in front of you. A good place to start then. Why have a large underground hub? So on the current layer, as I've said, Amersham only has a couple of lines. I can only hold a small train there. The trains then will run in, the line will split, and it's basically going to run through a loop round underneath my London stations that I'll be building next year, and then sort of return through Harrow on the Hill. And Harrow on the Hill, the line does actually split, so one of the lines goes off to Amersham and Watford and other places, and another line cuts underneath the others and runs out to Uxbridge. And Uxbridge itself has 3 lines running in with 4 platforms, and there is also sort of a holding depot at the side of it as well to hold more capacity of trains. So it seems sensible to sort of take the idea for Uxbridge and create it as a separate sort of standalone station. So I'm going to be scratch building it between now and Christmas. I'm going to do this over 4 episodes, I think, because it's the most sensible way to do it. So on the first one I'll talk about the design for the initial part of Uxbridge Station. So this is the front of Uxbridge Station as it is today, and it's no different to how it was back in the sort of mid to late 80s when I was living in Uxbridge and the surrounding area of Hillingdon and Ruislip Manor. And so I passed through the station regularly, travelling home and to see friends and stuff. And I always liked the front of the station entrance. It's a sort of a curved, I suppose, piazza style entrance. It's very much in the London Underground style, and there's some shops either side underneath. And then you go through the entrance and it leads you through. Looking back, you've got the in the main ticket hall, there's this stained glass window, but what you can see is the very striking concrete structure that the whole framework was built around back in the 50s. So I quite liked that sort of split roof end, and I wanted to keep that with the windows looking in. I could see into the tracks as well. I want to make the tracks and the platforms very visible from the outside as well, but obviously I needed to change the layout somewhat. That's going to come later, so I went looking for some bit more inspiration. This is a print I have by a lady called Rebecca Pymar, who's an illustrator and designer, and she's done a number of prints for the London Underground, which you can buy through London Transport shop, or you can buy from her direct. She gets more of the value of the purchase price. So I'll leave her email details below if you're interested. She also does prints of Norfolk and of Norwich area as well in this sort of style. So I quite liked this sort of round, the building with the big green windows, but I decided to sort of flip it and keep the sort of curved inner part of the Uxbridge station. So taking sort of Rebecca's print as inspiration and the Chiswick Park station, I usually start my design process by sort of doing a few little simple sketches just to sort of firm up what I wanted to do. So this is my idea for my new Uxbridge station. So it's going to be a lot taller than the current one. So having got an initial sketch, the sensible thing was to go and open up Inkscape, the free application software for designing. If you have watched some of the early ones, you'll know that I'm a big fan of Michael Chandwell and his use of it. This isn't a tutorial at all in how to use Inkscape. Go to Michael's channel for that. But this is just how I've put together the initial design. So using Inkscape, I sort of created a simple window template to start with, and then played around with just a number of sort of openings that I would have as you sort of curve around the entrance courtyard. From that initial concept, I basically decided the sensible thing to do next would be draw up windows in a more accurate scale that I could then print out and create using the sticky label method. So using the standard approach, sort of printed out paper, glued it all together, and then sort of sellotaped it to some cardboard packaging to just give the sort of square frame parts. Then to do the curve, put a sort of small retaining wall to the base card, and that sort of then takes the curve structure that I need to create, which then gives me this mock-up. And I was quite happy with the scale. It sort of has that more imposing feel about it compared to the taxis and buses. So as you can see, I've left the internal structure open at the moment, as I need to work out where I want my internal walls to go. So the next step is really to make up a template window just to get a feel if it's looking right. And then I think having followed Michael's recent build where he's doing Station Road and a number of buildings that are just a bit more irregular, the approach he took was build the sort of inner structure first and then be able to attach the walls onto the side. I think that's the right approach that I should follow for this. So whereas normally I would have built the outer walls first and maybe fitted the internals later. So I've been talking about the front of the station for Uxbridge, but what about the tracks inside? So obviously I want to have 6 platforms, 6 tracks running into the station, but I don't have the width in that part of the loft to just lay them out flat. And so I was sort of thinking about different ways I could maybe do it, and I remembered back to a trip we took a couple of years ago to Antwerp. So this grand looking station is Antwerp Station, typical big city station. Antwerp's quite special actually. Some people reckon it's like the 4th greatest railway station in the world. You may not have heard of it, but when you see the interior you'll start to understand where that comment comes from. So this is inside Antwerp railway station. It's just like a grand cathedral to railway, very reminiscent of a church almost. And if you actually go up the stairs and through, there's the dome, the lighted dome from above that just is an amazing visit. Anyway, I'm obviously not building something grand like that for the front of my Uxbridge station. It's not the station building that created the inspiration, it's the tracks inside and how they're laid out. And this is what stands behind that impressive building. It's just an amazing feat of engineering. So if you read it through, so +1, so up here there are 2 tracks that stop, so this is level +1. These are then shops underneath, so this is level 0, and then you go down the escalator to level -1, which is here, so you've got 2 tracks either side, and then you can go down further escalators, they start about here, and you go down into the bowels, which is -2, and these tracks actually run completely through the station, carrying on. And so that became the inspiration for my Uxbridge station, to have a triple-decked station. So back to a bit of sketching again. This is sort of what I've come up with as an initial concept. Okay, no details in terms of the structure or the architecture or anything like that. So I'm going to have at street level 2 tracks coming through, and then I'm going to have 2 tracks raised up above. So you'll need to travel up to these with trying to keep that current Uxbridge sort of structure for the roof up here, and then below I'm going to have 2 tracks that run underneath, and I'm going to continue these through the station into a return loop, which will allow me to make part of my underground a tail chaser, so that I can have trains just constantly running, which is what I really wanted to do. So that's the plan. So we'll go from this over to Inkscape. Back in Inkscape again then. So what you've got in front of me, so this red rectangle is roughly the dimensions of one carriage. Okay, so it's about 200 millimeters long and sort of 45 millimeters high, and so I need to fit 4 of those as a train along my various platforms. So this is going to be sort of the platform station looking sideways on. So I'm trying to, so you've got sort of 2 green struts up. That's sort of later detail I'll add in, but I'm trying to sort of replicate some of that sort of 50s concrete that you see at Uxbridge. But the 3 tracks will effectively sit on top of each other. So as I was saying before, the middle lane will effectively be my normal level, and so I need to split my 2 lines in and out into effectively through 6 lines, 2 of which are going to go up 1 level, so they've got to raise up about 60 millimeters. So it's not a big incline for a London Underground train. You can do that in quite a short distance, and then obviously 2 tracks will then have to also drop down 60 millimeters as well. I'll discuss how I'm going to do the track layout much later, as there's a number of ways you can do that with a whole different range of points and options. But for now, I'm just going to focus on the station part. So, and then obviously the bottom 2 will then run through as well, and then have the return loop. So that's the sideway on structure that I'm thinking of building. And then if I sort of go to the other angle, so you can sort of see a cross section through. And all the bits at the side, we'll just focus on what you can see in the center of the screen. So obviously the red represents the 6 trains. I'm going to have the platforms on the inner side, to the blue, so they'll just be probably solid wood. Each deck, so the light blue, again, it's going to be solid wood, so I've got a permanent structure to sort of hold it all. So one of the issues I was thinking about is, obviously, when things go wrong, you need to be able to get to your trains for derailments and stuff like that. So, which is why I've put the trains on the outer side, so that I can at least get my hands through to access them. As obviously, once I start building this structure, it gets to a point where there's no return and you can't dismantle it very easily. So I will be building it up. Going to cover all that in probably episode 3, as I still haven't. I've got more questions in my head than I've got answers at the moment. So as I mentioned in the last episode, I've got this structure downstairs that allows me to sort of scratch build and lay stuff out. So the top deck, I'm just sorting out some of the stuff around Amersham Station for the trackside stuff, so that's sort of progressing. But I've got the larger space below that I can lay out the Uxbridge station and work on it over the next 7 months. So I'm just trying to show you a mock-up of how it will look from the front with that. So that's obviously the Uxbridge station building, and then behind it should be that you can just sort of see that glimpse of the roof line behind it, and then obviously you can see the 2 decks that you'll have above the baseboard below with the 4 tracks, and then there'll be 2 tracks below it. So I'm going to do the framework for the station that will allow me to hold the 3 decks, and I'll make that up in wood, so I've got a solid structure to then scratch build on top of the various station elements, and then I should be able to just transport the whole lot up into the loft in one go. So obviously width is pretty critical. The maximum width I can have is 500 millimeters to get through the loft hatch. Obviously the length is not an issue. So we'll progress on, make up a framework, and see what we think. Hi again. So back in the garage, I'm going to build the subframe that will hold the Uxbridge line and the underground station that I'm going to be building, because effectively the only weight here is majority of it is just like 1 deck with the tracks through, and then obviously Uxbridge station itself is not a very heavy build, so I don't need to go for the sort of
10 centimetre deep framework, open framework they've got on the rest of the layout, because there's multiple decks and various things going on. So I'm just going to recycle the pine strips that I've got. So they're, what are they, 45 millimeters deep, I think, and sort of 20 millimeters wide. So one of the websites I follow is MR Benchwork. It's a guy over in the States, and he makes a lot of open framework benchwork. And one of his biggest philosophies is measure as little as possible. Okay, so measure less, work smart. So, what does he mean by that? So rather than work out what the length needs to be for the inner part of my frame, so my frame is 300 millimeters long, simply line everything up. So there, and then take my next block of wood, basically line it up. Find a pencil or a marking knife. And that's my cut line. So I'm not having to measure anything, I'm just working off the pieces I've got and work out what the dimensions should be. So, but I know it will fit. And then that'll become my, once I've got that set up, I'll do a stop block at the other end, and then I can cut out the other cross beams. So I cut the piece down, just test it out. That's good enough for me, so I'll now make up all the others to the same distance, length. So that's the subframework built, 300 millimeters wide, 180 long, and obviously you've got 3 holes. So I'll have one, the center one will be for my wiring loop to do the lights for the station, and then obviously I've got the 2 bus lines. So next bit is going to be the first deck that will basically be the lower level of the station line, so sort of -1. So I'm just marking out where the plaza for Uxbridge will sort of finish. So okay, so what I'm just trying out here is the possible layout for the track. So on the bottom deck, the 2 tracks will come in the center, and then they need to curve out to the outer edges of the station in this section here. And so I've tried it with a first and second radius curve. Obviously it's got to go through the S bend, which is the worst type, but obviously as you're approaching the station they should be running at a slower speed. However, just got to remember when I'm running the tail chaser not to have the speed too high, or else it's just going to derail as it hits into the station. Can't really avoid. So I've just been marking up where the central atrium is going to go, and I've been thinking back to the Antwerp station where the central tracks actually just go straight through, and obviously the outer tracks are on the outer edge. And as I've sort of shown you, to get my central tracks on the lower deck to the outer edge, they've got to go through like an S shape. And as this is going to be my tail chaser line, I basically want to keep it as straight as possible, don't I? Because I'm not going to be around to check the speed. And so if the trains are hurtling through the station, the simplest thing is for them to go straight through. So I'm going to revise the design slightly. So the bottom deck, the tracks will be in the middle, and you'll basically access the trains from the platforms that will still be here. But the train, 2 lines will go down the middle. And then for the sort of 0 and +1 decks, they will be on the outer edge. It's going to give a bit bit of difference to the design, I think that'll be okay, but I think it makes sense not to have the S curve on the tail chaser, as that's where the crashes are going to happen. Okay, I will just double check my track spacing. If I've got enough space there, I can always amend the layout. Well, I've just come back inside. I just want to try out where I want my tracks to go. So with this arrangement, you can see I've got the lowest level, so the -1 level, with the tracks in the middle. There is space for them to have it, and then the gap between the track and the platform, that would work. Obviously I would have columns in the way between the train and the doors, so I'd maybe need to look at the positioning just so it didn't look silly. But obviously with this arrangement where the track's here, you've got the whole open platform, you don't need to worry about the location line. However, what I was normally going to do was that the tracks would be sitting an outer edge, but I've realized that it doesn't really matter if I have the tracks in the middle or here. At the moment I can change them because they'll just sit either side of the platform, and so there is flexibility in design to try that out later. Well, a good way to clear your head, go for a walk with the dog next to a railway track. They were running really slow yesterday. It was a very heavy rain and a lot of flooding around. I think it was flooding at Newcastle. I've never seen trains run so slow. Yeah, but the time to London must have just doubled to about 10 hours, I think, if you'd gone at that speed. Anyway, I sort of been mulling the problem with this bottom deck, and I have thought of a third option, which would still give me 6 platforms and the track running through the centre as well for the tail chaser where the trains don't stop. I'll set the board up again, put some track down, show you what I mean, and then I might just pose it as a question, what do people think? But it does mean a couple of extra points into the layout. I sort of minimised it down to just a bare minimum of points really to do this. But as I sort of said before, I can change things a lot going forward yet at the moment, because I'm just trying to get the basic framework so that I can start doing the scratch building. But if I know that there's some options for how I lay out the track, it might be better to know them now rather than later. Right, go back to the garage. Right, partly for to explain to you and also for my own sanity, I'm just trying to work out possible track layouts into the station. So obviously I've got, at some point my 2 lines will have to split into 6 lines, okay, and then they roll into the station on 3 different levels. So this would be one side, okay, so this would be and then you'd get a mirror image the other side. So the bottom 2 go into the lowest level, and they're going to be part of my tail chaser line. So all the tracks end up on the outer edge of the station. So the top line, they just go straight in effectively. The middle one needs to partly curve over, and so they all overlap, and then the bottom one has this tight S curve that I'm thinking and mulling over, because obviously this is my tail chaser line and I've put the S curve on the tail chaser line. Now you could go, well, have the straight through on the tail chaser, but then that would make the tracks in the sort of pyramid layout, and I just thought that did look silly, whereas this is more like a valley of just 6 tracks. I just quite like the idea of it, bonkers as it may seem. So that was one thought, and then as I was walking back, I sort of thought, well, I could put the 2 tracks in the middle going straight through the centre of the station, as I sort of shown you on the drawing, but I still quite like this arrangement. So then I ended up walking back thinking, well, I could stick a couple of points in, and so I now end up with this arrangement. So good old knackered Hornby track from the 70s. So just for the lower deck, I could actually have, well, you could have 2 points either side. And so I've got the 2 lines that would go through and then return back as part of my tail chasing continuous line. And then I could have the 2 platform sidings, so that I still have my 6 platforms plus 2 lines in the middle running through the centre of the station. So you've got this whole arrangement. So that was one idea. And then I was thinking, well, I can obviously this is the in line. In fairness, you can go in or out on any of the lines, because the upper lines you basically where the lines are in 2 further back is going to have the option to basically any train approaching the station can go to any of the 6 platforms, and any train leaving any of the 6 platforms can get to the up line back to London. So the down line can go into any of the 6 and the outline, or you can go through the tail chaser. So you could potentially go into that one, even though there would be trains coming the other way. So it's a bit of a, or I could just have one line going through the centre of the station as part of my tail chaser, and then it basically comes back on this line, and that would remove 1 point. I quite like the idea of actually having 4 lines at the bottom with the 2 continuous lines going through, so the trains wouldn't stop, and then the option of the 6. Yeah, I think that's the way I might go. It doesn't make any difference to how I do the framing of the baseboards at the moment, because the bottom board is just going to be solid, and so I don't need to worry about cutting out any sections. It's only the next 2 up that obviously you have to have some cut out sections, and they are only going to have a very simple arrangement, so cutting them up is not a big issue. If you've wondered how I'm going to stack the 3 layers up, so obviously the baseboard is the lowest deck, and obviously you've got 2 decks above and then a roof. When you walk dogs, obviously a byproduct from dogs, and you generate an awful lot of these. These are poo bag cardboard tubes, and I've got about 50 of them. So, and strangely enough, they are just 60 millimeters high, which is the spacing between my different tracks. So they will make very nice concrete columns, through the middle of which I can put some steady bar. So that is how I'm going to build my station, with dog poo bag tubes, studded bar. So a bit like doing a helix. Why didn't I ever do a helix? I think helixes are amazing things. They are just mesmerizing to watch them, but it just feels like cup of tea railroading. You know, the train goes in and then you go off and have a cup of tea and it comes out the other end, and they're not really real life. Although I suppose somebody in Switzerland, there's probably a helix going around a mountain to get from one level to another. I'm sure I've seen a train doing that. But yeah, so I decided to go no helix with this layout very early on. My choice. I appreciate other people with the area constraints have to use helixes to get from one deck to the other. So, and I admire anybody who attempts to build their own helix from scratch. It's clearly a feat of engineering. Right, enough rambling on. I will come back tomorrow and cut the 2 decks out, and I can lay out the track, and then I will be good to go back to the bedroom and start working out how to assemble this thing. Hope this rambling wasn't too taxing for your brain and somebody's still watching this. So I wanted to give the decks some rigidity. Obviously I've got to run the tracks along them, so I'm going to make them out of the same 11mm ply that I use for the baseboards. That'll make them nice and strong and firm for the track. So that's the first deck. So this is level 2, well, ground level. Obviously -1 is the main framework deck underneath, and then I just need to create +1, which is where the tracks just literally run straight into the platforms. So I'll knock that up now. So that's the trackwork decks built. For the roof I'll go with probably 6mm ply. It doesn't need to be as sort of thick, and I'll get a sheet of that. Obviously I've got these spacer blocks, so I can hide these in the station structure. There was always doorways for staff to, you know, stairways, private access to get from one platform to another. So yeah, you would assume the London Underground staff would have their own quick access to get from one platform to another, so that would be quite easy to do. They don't foul with the track where the track positioning will go, so that's okay. Right, back to the bedroom. I think that's all the stuff in the garage completed for now. No, I'm going to make the platforms out of wood. Yeah, I'll do that now. So I'm going to make it out the same 11mm ply, and then I can sort of texture the surface. So I'm just going to do a test fit for the tracks and the platforms. Just get some positioning so I can mark out where I want the platforms to go and roughly where the tracks will go. So this is the -1 level, so the sub-layer full, with the 2 centre tracks running through and then the 2 platform sidings. This is the lower level with the central column sort of in place, and sort of a back wall, and I've got a train. So this will be quite dark down here. I'll sort of be able to view in from one side. And then obviously this is sort of the ground level. So just trying out spacings between the columns, the platform, the central atrium. And finally with deck 3 in place. So if I go to the far end, that's the Valley of Death. 3 tracks. So from about this point here, the bottom one will start to rise up. So these will start getting closer. At this point it's quite extreme. And obviously the top one will start to drop down so that they will end up at the same level. And then the points will be to split the 2 lines to the 6 lines. So probably a metre, metre and a half that way. You then come through this section where they obviously will move into position for the outer parts of the station. Those tracks, obviously the tail chasing through. Then you go up to level 0, and then level +1. So for the sub levels, I'm going to go with these columns. It keeps it just very simple, and obviously they just fit, and I can put the studded bar through that will just hold it all together, a bit like you do a helix. And then for the top level, I'm going to go back to images of Uxbridge Station, where you have the concrete pillars that sort of form that roof structure. So the idea is everything below is, I suppose, more simpler, and I want to try and recreate that Uxbridge structure as much as possible. So final things are just to decide, you know, final position of platforms. Let's see, but let me know what you think. So this section is going to be the start of the embankments. So you'll have retaining walls either side coming up. and obviously it'll get narrower, just the distance will sort of level out. Where it then finishes from retaining wall section through to here, the start of the station, I'm going to go with girder bridges across so they span the distance. I think that'll look quite interesting. I think I need to Google a lot of girder bridges and see what ideas I can get. So there'll be 4 girder bridges, and then this will be the start of the station here. So obviously the bottom part would normally be underground, so I might build across, but I'll have an access panel so that you can get your hand in there, but also so you've got a back wall, and then the idea is this is open, you can see in to the station for the upper 2 decks. Okay, plenty to get on with for the next 7 months between now and Christmas. I'm going to start at the far end with the main station building, as that's just cardboard, and I quite enjoy cardboard, and it'll allow me to get some images and ideas for this part of the station to work on over the summer. If you made it this far, thanks for watching first episode of Mind the Gap, and I'll probably upload the next one in a couple of months' time, give you some time to work on stuff. So the next upload will be just the normal layout in the loft, sort of an April update in a couple of weeks' time on the scenics around Amersham station, which I'm still working on as well. Got a load of cable gantry, it just gets bigger and bigger. Anyway, they're all ready to go up. So, as always, thanks for watching. Thanks for your comments and supports and likes from the last one. Do appreciate it, and hopefully catch you next time.